Yes, sir, we've got you.
Kevin Barone, Capital Lobby Group. I'm here to introduce 25 RS 1277. This is a bill in dealing with our industrial hemp law, trying to match it since our program is going to be going to the USDA. We're trying to match state law and federal law.
Committee, any questions or objections to introduction of this bill?
Chairman,
Seeing none?
sorry,
Oh,
Mr.
yes, sir.
Chairman. Yeah, we can't hear because the noise outside.
Oh.
What does this have to do with?
Oh,
Industrial hemp, and since our program is moving to the USDA, we're matching up federal law with, or state law with federal law, so they're on the same page.
okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, that bill's introduced.
Thank you very much.
Sure. We have, I have one. It's 25 RS 1123 that is an ethics bill. Any questions or objections to the introduction of that one? Seeing none, that is introduced. Any other bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to our hearing on House Bill 2106. This bans contributions from foreign nationals for the support or defeat of a proposed constitutional amendment here in Kansas. And I'll give Jason the floor to explain the bill. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2106 does amend one statute, KSA 25-4180, regarding campaign finance regulations on those persons who engage in promoting or opposing an amendment to the Constitution of the state of Kansas. Under current law, any person who's engaged in this kind of campaign activity must submit an annual preliminary and supplemental reports on contributions that the person has received that total more than $50. They submit those to the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. House Bill 2106 would prohibit the direct or indirect receipt of contributions for promoting or opposing amendments to the Constitution from foreign nationals. There's a general prohibition on that with definitions when the bill was introduced in the House, and then the House Committee on Elections made some amendments to 2106 to further require that any donor who is not a foreign national has to certify that the donor has not received contributions from foreign nationals that total more than $100,000 in the preceding 4-year period from the date of their contribution. Violations of this prohibition on receipt of contributions from foreign nationals can be prosecuted by the Attorney General under the provisions added by the House Committee on Elections. I will direct the committee's attention to the definition of foreign national, which is on page 2, line 31 of the bill. Means any individual who's not a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the United States, any government or subdivision of a foreign country or municipality of a foreign country, any foreign political party, any other entity, such as a business organization that is organized under as its principal place of business in a foreign country, or any United States entity, such as a business entity that is wholly or majority owned by a foreign national, with some exceptions there for contributions or expenditures derived entirely from funds generated within the United States from the United States operations, and all decisions concerning those contributions and expenditures are made by individuals who are U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. The bill would go into effect, these changes would go into effect on July 1st of this year, and so they would be applicable for starting in 25 for any constitutional amendment campaigns that we're running in 25. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Committee, any questions for Jason? Senator Clifford?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this align with federal law, which would prohibit these contributions, especially considering multinationals that are U.S.-based?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously federal law doesn't have any prohibitions with respect to campaigns on constitutional amendment questions. And so I would have to check to see if these align with any federal prohibitions on other campaign finance contributions by foreign nationals. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, so What this act is trying to do, are there any examples of state lawmakers, county commissioners, local government accepting foreign donations, or is this legislation to just prevent that from happening in the future?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to the conferees in terms of any specific examples that this legislation might address.
Any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so this would require the report of contributions in excess of $50?
Yes, that does not change. So if you receive more than $50 in total contributions, you have to report those donations to the commission.
And that's consistent with many of our other
Yes,
limits.
yes, we do lots of reporting on contribution amounts to the commission. The added wrinkle is the additional certification that you haven't received contributions from foreign nationals of more than $100,000 in the last 4 years.
Thank you.
And it's specific to promoting or opposing a constitutional amendment. So that's what we're trying to weigh. Correct, Jason? Okay. Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. We have in-person proponent testimony this morning. I'm going to give, so we have time to work the bill at the end, about 12 minutes for proponents, 12 minutes for opponents. And we'll start off with Caitlin Sutherland, Americans for Public Trust. And Caitlin, I'll start your 12-minute clock. That's for all three testimonies, so just so you, there you go. Caitlin, go ahead.
Thank you. Chairman Thompson and members of the committee, my name is Caitlin Sutherland, and I'm the founding executive director of Americans for Public Trust. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that works to uncover and publicize outside money and influence in politics and policy, including tracing foreign dark money. I thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2106 because enacting this legislation is a crucial step to ensure your politics are free from foreign meddling. As you've heard, despite a federal ban on foreign nationals influencing elections, they can still exploit loopholes on the state and federal level that still allow foreign money to flow into important policy fights and electoral tools. And that's because there is no federal or Kansas prohibition on foreign nationals contributing to organizations that spend for or against ballot measures. This foreign influence loophole must be closed, especially because earlier this month, important tax records were released that reveal a Swiss billionaire by the name of Hans-Jörg Wiest funneled an additional $59 million in a single year to liberal dark money groups. Mr. Wiest is not a U.S. citizen, but his goal is to, quote, reinterpret the American Constitution in the light of progressive politics, end quote. According to the New York Times, Mr. Wiest's, quote, political activism is channeled through a daisy chain of opaque organizations that mask the ultimate recipients of his money, end quote. One of those opaque organizations is a Washington, D.C. group called the 1630 Fund, and they are the largest beneficiary of Mr. Wiest's foreign money, receiving almost $280 million over many years. After receiving his foreign cash, 1630 Fund has turned around and poured $130 million into ballot issue campaigns in 25 states, including Kansas. In 2022, 1630 Fund was the #1 donor to Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, an organization that formed to oppose a legislatively referred amendment to protect life in Kansas. That amendment was defeated in part by almost $1.6 million in foreign-backed funds contributed by 1630 Fund. We also must remember that as Mr. Wiest's money flows through the 1630 Fund, there is absolutely nothing stopping China or Qatar from taking advantage of these same loopholes. Kansas has an opportunity to close this foreign influence loophole and ensure your elections are free from foreign influence and interference. Foreign nationals are already prohibited from contributing to candidates, so why should organizations that support or oppose constitutional amendments be any different? I urge you to support House Bill 2106 to help stop foreign nationals from influencing Kansas. Thank you for your time, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. We'll hold for questions till all the proponent testimonies in. Up next, we have Jason Sneed from Honest Elections Project. Jason?
Thank you, Chairman Thompson and members of the committee. My name is Jason Sneed. I'm the Executive Director of Honest Elections Project Action. We are a nationwide nonprofit dedicated to protecting election integrity. I'm here to support House Bill 2106, which I believe is a straightforward measure to ban foreign influence in ballot measure campaigns. This is no hypothetical concern, as you have just heard, about the millions of dollars flowing from a Swiss billionaire through an organization called the 1630 Fund into ballot measure campaigns in this state and 24 others. And remember, though, that while we have been able to trace funds that are tied to Hans-Jörg Wyss, there is nothing stopping hostile foreign powers like China or Russia from exploiting the same loopholes in our laws to peddle foreign influence into our elections. Decisions as significant as amending the Constitution belong exclusively with the citizens of our country and with the voters of this state. Foreign nationals simply have no business influencing those highly influential campaigns. So, to be effective, I believe that a foreign funding ban should do at least 4 things, and House Bill 2106 does them. First, states must ban both direct and indirect contributions from foreign nationals. Further, a ban should be designed to prevent groups like the 1630 Fund from essentially laundering large sums of foreign money into these campaigns by accepting and using foreign donations for other purposes, freeing up resources from American donors in order to spend on those campaigns. A clear way to accomplish this is to require donors to affirm that they have not received more than a sum of money, in this case $100,000, over a 4-year period to help deal with that money fungibility problem. Second, the protections applied in this bill should be applied to independent expenditures to avoid creating an unnecessary loophole where groups that are funded by foreign nationals can simply pivot their spending to independent campaigns rather than direct contributions. Third, the ban should be applied to foreign nationals, and as you heard from the definition, House Bill 2106 does that. It is simply not enough to merely target foreign governments or political parties. Foreign meddling is toxic, no matter whether the funds originate from a Chinese government or from an individual activist like Mr. Wyss. And finally, I think it's important to note that banning foreign money is about ensuring the First Amendment and free speech rights of American citizens and protecting the democratic process. It is not about, in any way, shape, or form, abridging the free speech rights of American citizens. So it's important to ensure that we protect the privacy of American donors who wish to engage in First Amendment activity. HB 2106 would make great strides towards safeguarding the integrity of Kansas elections against foreign influence. This bill passed the Kansas House with overwhelming and bipartisan support, and I encourage you to advance House Bill 2106 to continue to protect Kansas elections going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And finally, Catherine Gonzalez, Heritage Actions for America. And Catherine, you still have got about 6 minutes or so you're in good shape.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Thompson, members of the committee, my name is Catherine Gonzalez. I am the Director of State Advocacy for Heritage Action for America. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2106. Heritage Action supports House Bill 2106, and we believe that free and fair elections are the bedrock of our republic. Every Kansan should have the confidence in the security and integrity of our election system. In George Washington's 1796 farewell address, he cautioned that, quote, foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government, end quote. And with growing geopolitical threats like the threat of the Chinese Communist Party, Kansas is wise to ensure the integrity of its elections and guard against the influence of foreign actors seeking to undermine Kansas interests. You have my written testimony before you. I'll just note, foreign meddling in the U.S. political landscape is not a hypothetical problem, as previous conferees have mentioned. States like Kansas are right to address it, and foreign nationals are aiming to make contributions to influence Kansas Constitution, and House Bill 2106 addresses that and rightly pushes back. But also, Kansas is not alone in its endeavor to fight back. As of today, several other states across the country have introduced very similar legislation, and that legislation has already been moving through the chambers. And Ohio already prohibited direct and indirect just last year in a bill in 2024. Finally, Heritage Action lobbies alongside of and on behalf of grassroots across the country, including many in Kansas. And protecting Kansas elections from outside influence is top of mind for the grassroots and your constituents, keenly aware of the fact that the integrity of our government and protecting liberty hinge upon the ability to conduct transparent, accurate, and fair elections. So we thank you for your time. I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time, and we urge you to pass House Bill 2106.
Thank you, Catherine. Committee, we have no written in-person or written proponent testimony. So I'll open it up to questions for any one of our three conferees in favor of this bill. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. One of you needs to come up here probably, and we talked a little bit about this in my office. The group that will be charged with overseeing the implementation of this is, could you fill in that blank?
It would be, I know it has recently been renamed, but it would be the Kansas Ethics Commission.
And part of my concern was that they did not provide any testimony, and so I'm always a little hesitant to put an additional task on an agency or organization without giving them the opportunity to respond. So I guess my question is, and I didn't ask you this in my office, did any of you reach out to them at all to ask about this?
My organization has not, but I know that there's multiple interested parties that they may have, and I may not have been aware of it, as well as the bill sponsor in the House.
Who was?
It was Representative Proctor.
Representative Proctor. That would be good to know, because I hate to ask them to do something when we don't know if they have the capacity to do it.
Absolutely.
But thank you. Thank you for that.
And I will check with Chairman Proctor over there to see what the status of that situation is, whether or not he's had that discussion. Any other questions? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we would all agree that we do not want foreign influence into, especially something like our constitutional amendment. But my concern is, how do we know that's not? I mean, I could sign an affidavit that somebody gave me $500 and, you know, and it's not from foreign. How can they really make sure this isn't happening?
That is a great question. Thank you very much. When you know, candidates much like yourself, are you already permitted or prohibited from accepting money from foreign nationals? I think that we could all understand that foreign nationals still might be giving directly to candidates. But when that instance is found, then they can be prosecuted for that crime. Right now, there are, you know, many well-known instances of foreign money in elections, Mayor Adams in New York, for one thing. That way, you can ban it and then prosecute it if it's found. A great example of how is this implemented in real life is Ohio. Just last year, Ohio passed very similar legislation that would ban direct and indirect funding of these ballot issues, because they saw about 20 million in foreign-backed funds influencing their state's constitution. And once they passed that law, 1630 Fund was unable to spend in their state to support or oppose ballot measures, you know, essentially kicking out these foreign-funded groups from influencing your constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. So I agree foreign nationals shouldn't be playing, but what about out-of-state individuals trying to influence? Would you be acceptable to the bill being amended so that it's Kansans having a say in Kansas elections?
Understood. Thank you for the question. We have certainly heard that feedback quite a bit. Right now, we are focusing on bringing federal law, or federal and state law, in line with candidates and ballot issue committees. Those should not be treated differently. So as it stands, you know, out-of-state U.S. citizens can contribute to candidates, whereas foreign nationals cannot. So we want to bring state law aligned with those with ballot issue committees and make sure that we are making an effort to prohibit foreign nationals from contributing directly or indirectly to these ballot issue campaigns.
If Jason, it looks like Jason Sneed or Catherine Gonzalez would like to weigh in on that as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just supplement what Caitlin just said. The objective here, and I think the opportunity, is to draw a very clear, bright line between what American citizens can do and what non-citizens can do, which aligns with the federal law as it applies to candidates. It is a very clean measure. It's defensible in court. When states have tried to go further and restrict activity, from other states, they have run into obstacles, and courts have not accepted that under First Amendment, on First Amendment grounds. So there are some issues there going further than just dealing with foreign nationals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually thinking about this topic this morning, and that you're just defining the border to be the U.S. We're defining the border to be the state if we amend this bill. So I think it would have standing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't know who this is before, but I know it was amended in the House to add the $100,000 within 4 years. What was the reasoning behind that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer that question. The idea with the $100,000 threshold is to ensure that you are going after what you could call the biggest fish, the people that are trying to put millions of dollars to influence the outcome of a campaign, while avoiding unnecessarily tripping up groups that may even inadvertently take a small amount of money. So that's why throughout the bill you'll see things like a mens rea element that you have to knowingly accept the money, the $100,000 threshold, and so forth. The other aspect of the threshold, the 4-year period, is to help deal with the problem that I mentioned during my testimony of the fungibility question. The idea here would be that a group might take a lot of money from a foreign national and then say, oh, our bookkeeping is golden and we're only using the foreign dollars on, XYZ. Of course, leaving out that they're freeing up dollars from American donors to spend on ballot measures. So the idea here is that basically a group that wants to spend either on an independent expenditure campaign or to contribute to a committee would basically have to make a decision. Do I want to take foreign money or do I want to spend on these ballot measure campaigns? I think that's a reasonable question to ask of them.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions, committee? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For anyone, I know it's been brought up about banning other states. My concern would be at a national level that would violate the First Amendment. Would that be something that might end up being brought up in court if we were to amend it and add states as well? That would be my concern. What do you think?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is a concern. There are other states that have attempted this, Florida as well, and those attempts to ban out-of-state money have been caught up in the court on First Amendment grounds. So that's definitely an issue that I would flag for the committee.
Any other questions, committee? Senator Tyson.
Just to be clear, Jason can write it so that it's divided, right? So that we wouldn't lose one provision of the bill if it did go to court.
Be severable.
Yes,
correct. Yeah. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll turn to our opponent testimony. We have written only, actually, opponent testimony from Dale Inyard, Mary Stang, Carrie Sue Vosberg, Sedgwick County Committeewoman, and neutral written only testimony committee from Brett Anderson of Sedgwick County. So seeing no further testimony, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2106 and turn our attention to working SCR 1611, which was the constitutional or concurrent resolution we heard yesterday. And let Jason give us a quick brief overview before we start working on that bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, SCR 1611 is the proposed amendment to the Kansas Constitution to amend Article 3 of the Constitution to require the statewide election of the justices of the Kansas Supreme Court. The language provides for staggered elections based on the position of the justices and the general elections in November of 2028, 2030, and 2032. The justices elected would each serve for 6-year terms upon election and then stand for re-election. The proposed amendment would also abolish the Supreme Court nominating commission that has been in existence since the 1960s for proposing nominees for appointment to the Kansas Supreme Court. It would also amend Section 8 of Article 3 to allow justices to participate in partisan organizations and hold office in such organizations, and amend Section 15 to remove a reference to the nominating commission. The election, the resolution and proposed amendment, if approved by 2/3 of both chambers, would go on the general ballot in November of 2026.
Committee, there is one amendment coming, and but before any questions on the base bill. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a look at that amendment and let Jason pass it out. Yes, Senator Francisco, sorry about that.
Thank you. I'm looking at the calendar for Wednesday, February 26th. It talks about request for bill introductions and the hearing. It doesn't say anything about working bills not previously heard.
I believe I mentioned at the end of committee yesterday that we may work this one.
You may have mentioned that, but it should be in the calendar. It should be in the calendar in terms of notice because I was just asked by someone when they thought we might work this. There may be individuals who watched us yesterday and had some ideas for amendments. So I'm very concerned. You know, I also know that I had some questions about the wording. So I think it's inappropriate to, I don't mind if we want to talk about this bill, but I would hate to take final action today and without an opportunity for other amendments.
So noted. Committee, well, let's go on to the amendment. And by the way, Senator Francisco did ask about the campaign finance, and Angela sent that information out to us. But I did mention that we would potentially work this bill today, and so I feel like we need to go ahead and get it done. Our timeline is such over the next 2 weeks that we have an awful lot of bills to get heard, and so obviously any floor amendments would be considered as well. So, committee, I'll go ahead and let Jason explain this in his somewhat clarifying language, really, on this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the balloon handed out before you initially on page 1 of the resolution would make a change in line 17 to remove "have the right to." So the sentence would simply read, "The citizens of Kansas who are qualified electors shall elect the justices of the Supreme Court." The next amendment is in line 25. This was the amendment I believe was suggested in the written testimony of the Secretary of State's office that instead of specifying an even year election for filling a vacancy in the term of any justice, that it would be filled by election as provided by law. You'll see a corresponding amendment on page 3, lines 40 and 41, simply to match up the explanatory statement language with that previous amendment. And then finally on page 4, lines 18 through 22 would change the date of the election. If this is approved, then the question would go to the ballot at the primary election in August of 2026.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Any questions on the amendment? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but a comment. I was concerned about the November 26th. I think the August 26th is a good compromise, so I appreciate your efforts on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion on the amendment? Or I guess I'll move my amendment. Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've done this sometimes previously. Would it be possible to divide the amendment? I believe certainly changing the "have the right to" should not be part of this bill by election provided by law, but I would like the opportunity to vote on the final question on the last page separately.
Okay, that'll be fine. We can divide the question and first talk about line 17 is your concern, correct, Senator Francisco?
No, I'm comfortable with every.
Oh, you're comfortable with that, okay.
So the first 3 pages of the amendment, which was really, or the amendments on page 1 and
2 and 3, okay. So we will take the amendments on page 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll consider the timing of the date. Okay, that sounds good. So I guess, yeah, we'll need a second on that. Second by Senator Blue. So open up to any questions or comments on the first portion of that division. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and, do you move your amendment then? I guess, do I move that one? I will move, okay, I will move that. And is there a second on that? Second by Senator Blue. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. And that carries. So now we'll go to the second part of the division on this, and we'll go back to Senator Francisco to explain this division and what you would like to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was more an opportunity. I believe that there are often more people participating in the general election. This is actually a proposal about including voters. And often there's not a good reason to come out in August if many times you don't have opposition on a primary. So to me, if we're trying to say, or the background from this is the voters should be participating, I think it makes more sense to do that at a November election. So I'm simply asking for the opportunity to vote no if someone else moves this part of the amendment.
Committee, any discussion on that? Senator Fausto?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was your question going to be any discussion on what Senator
Yes, yeah,
Francisco
that was what I was
said,
opening up to
or
any discussion.
Oh,
On this particular portion, because we
I
divided
have a
the question.
question on
Yes.
this, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. And this question might be for Jason. So if, I'm wondering why the amendment is saying a special election, but then it's also saying held on in conjunction with the primary election, which would already take place. So
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the Constitution specifies that a constitutional amendment can be placed on the ballot at a general election or at a special election called by the legislature for that purpose. It does not specifically provide for a primary election for the ballot. And so our office has determined that this language conforms with that by calling a special election, just that the special election would be held in conjunction on the same day as the primary election.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Senator Clifford.
Yes, thank you for letting me comment. It's probably obvious, but independents would not vote in primaries. So this opens up the entire
Correct, but they would
electorate.
be able to vote in a special election.
Correct.
That is
and that's
correct.
why it's there. Thank you, Mr.
That
Chairman.
is true. Senator Tyson.
And the revisers can clarify this, but independents can vote in a primary election. Their ballot would just have this on it, unless they had primary. Would that be correct, Jason?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, generally persons who are not registered with a political party are not permitted to vote in a primary election because typically primary elections only have party candidates on the ballot. But when you have a constitutional amendment on the primary election ballot, then those voters can, and that is the only question that they vote on in the primary election.
Okay.
That is what happened in 2022 with the constitutional amendment on the primary election in August of 22.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have any comments from the Secretary of State's office regarding this part of the amendment?
No, not right now. I would imagine they would be neutral. This is policy we're setting on this particular situation on the timing. So, other than maybe a little fiscal note issue or something like that, that we don't have anything on. But I can request an updated fiscal note if this passes as it is.
I would appreciate an updated fiscal note because I would be interested in, what additional work or any comments that they have. Obviously, they're not going to be talking about the date, but they may talk about the difficulty of a special election. If that's the case, I think we should question whether there should be separate ballots for everyone at this August election rather than just people who are independents. If it's a special election, I don't know that that ballot should include individuals running in a primary and this question. So that's the other question I'd like them to weigh in on.
Senator Murphy.
I think, Mr. Chairman, so what about November of 25?
Oh, you mean changing the
Yeah.
date to November 25?
Is it on a November?
Yeah. Senator
That is-
Francisco. Senator Francisco, yeah.
That's allowed for in our Constitution. The primary is not mentioned, and I think our revisor explained that. Does that make sense?
No, that wasn't the question. I was trying to address your concern and see if that would help your feelings about when it was held.
I mean, if it was held in 2026, in November?
No, I suggested 2025, but it keeps it in November rather than a primary.
I think that's, I think that may be a good change. It's not in the primary. I think the question for individuals would be if, when this resolution is effective, how much time would there be for individuals to do education? I didn't pick the 2026 date, so I'd be interested in hearing why they were talking about 2026 instead of 2025. But 2025, I think would be interesting. There may be fewer people turning out for a city election than in November, but certainly worth discussion.
Well, I think that date is a little bit, negotiable. Obviously, I think the 26th, they were thinking you're going to have a big turnout in 26, obviously. But by the same token, would this constitutional amendment be overshadowed by the big turnout, up at the top of the ballot, what's going on, whether or not that's down ballot? So that's certainly a concern. Any further discussions? Senator Gossage.
I would just say, I can't imagine there would be a fiscal note, but there definitely would be one if they had to produce 2 ballots. I just can't imagine that would be efficient.
Right. So, any further discussion? Seeing none, do I move that amendment, or, okay, I will move this amendment, and do I have a second? Second by Senator Blue. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The motion carries. So we will go with the August 4th, 2026. And are there any further discussion on the bill? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to be recorded.
Okay.
And then the second question I have, which I did bring up during the hearing yesterday, so people might have had a chance to think about this, was just the wording in the explanatory statement. When it talks about both, this is on page 4, lines 2 and 3, and again on lines 6 and 7, it talks about whose membership consists of a majority of lawyers. I agree that that's a truthful statement. At the same time, I think it's a bit of a misleading statement. Actually, I think if you would accept a conceptual amendment, I'm going to go back, and this has to do with lines 4 when it talks about a vote against this proposition would continue the current system. I would move that we amend current to merit selection.
In what, on what line?
In line 4.
Okay.
Says a vote against this proposition would continue the merit selection system. And I did ask yesterday during the hearing if that would be appropriate language to refer to that, because I think it would be good for people to know that that's the system that we have is identified as the merit selection system. Certainly this wording is going to be discussed as people review and think about voting on the
Is there a second on that before we go to discussion? And then we'll have, okay, go ahead, Senator Dietrich.
Mr. Chair, maybe I missed this. Are you suggesting we strike the word current or leave the word current and include merit selection?
I think what she intends on line 4 on page 4 is say, continue the current merit selection system. Not strike, but add those two words. Yeah.
If you're more comfortable with that, then that's what I
I
said.
just want to make.
I think it's probably not. But I think that that's probably more understandable, the current merit selection system.
Is there a second on that amendment before we open to discussions? Seeing none, we don't have a second on that one. So a second by Senator Fasquedo. Okay. Any discussion? I think I saw Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason, is the term merit system used in statute? I don't recall.
I do not recall that precise term is used in the statutes on the nominating commission or in the current constitutional provision. I'd have to double check on that.
I know the opponents to the bill used that particular terminology, but they clarified yesterday that there are 5 attorneys and 4 non-attorneys, and the chair is an attorney. I mean, with regard to, that's the makeup of the commission. And I know it was also the Missouri model was considered as well. So that was some of the conversation yesterday. Senator Thomas?
So if I may, if it's not in statute, I think adding opinion language about the current system might be a little risky, because then I could make an amendment and say, could we add the current system, which I think is terrible? You know what I mean? Like, we could put that language in there because that's my opinion. So I heard lots of concerning testimony yesterday, but if we're going to add the term merit-based, I would like to be consistent with what it says in statute. And if it doesn't say it in statute, then I don't think we need to add it, because then we're just putting opinions of conferees into the bill. So I would oppose that.
Okay. Senator Francisco?
I'd like to make a substitute motion,
Okay.
because I do appreciate that comment, and that's why I had asked, is this considered that system? So my substitute motion would be to say, I guess it would be on line 3, whose membership consists of, and then define it for citizens, 1 from each congressional district, 4 lawyers, from 1 from each congressional district, and a lawyer appointed by the bar. And our reviser might have sort of better language on this. But I think that to just say whose membership consists of a majority of lawyers is, again, truthful but misleading.
Is there a second on that amendment?
And continue, the same would be.
So it expands the text to explain what the commission is consistent of.
Mm-hmm. And so that would also need to be a change on lines 6 and 7.
Got it. Jason understands what that would look like. Committee, well, first of all, is there a second on that substitute motion? Seeing none, I think we're back on the original. Do we go back to the original motion after the substitute? Yeah, so we're back on the original motion by Senator Francisco, just to the current merit selection. And Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back on page 2, all of this is defined, under the strikeouts. In fact, it's even named on line 34 on page 2, shall be known as the Supreme Court Nominating Commission. Doesn't talk about merit at all. So I'd just like to point out that it exists in, I assume the strikeout relates to the current bill, so the current law is calling it Supreme Court Nominating Commission. Thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I withdraw my amendment.
Okay, thank you. We're back on the base bill as amended. What's that? Oh, yes. Withdraw, second needs to withdraw. There we go. So the motion is withdrawn. Back on the base bill. Any further comments, questions, or what is the will of the committee? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we pass out Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611 favorably as amended.
Is there a second? Second by Senator Blue. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Do you want your vote recorded? I'm sure you would. And thank you, committee. I appreciate the robust discussion and with all your work on that. We do have a hearing tomorrow on Senate Bill, let me grab it here, Senate Bill 254, and it's going to be a lot of testimony on that. We will not meet on Friday. But we do have a full week next week. We've got all 5 days. I'm unfortunately scheduling next week, so hopefully that's the only week we have to do that, and I appreciate that. But again, thank you for your work on this.